Hey everyone, and a huge welcome to this explainer, brought to you on behalf of Forge College. Now, if you're joining us right after our capstone orientation, you know exactly where we are. We are picking up our hard hats and getting straight to work. Our mission today, we're taking those familiar Ethereum ERC vault patterns and mapping them to a concrete, working Solana architecture. Building a vault on Solana is really where the theoretical rubber finally meets the decentralized road. So let's just dive right in.
Here's our architectural blueprint for today. We'll start with the Solana Vault blueprint, then move on to the anatomy of a vault, deposits and withdrawals, wiring up the architecture, the building inspector, and finally, wrapping up the capstone.
Okay, Section 1, the Solana Vault Blueprint, Adapting ERC Patterns.
Now, what's genuinely fascinating here is the profound shift in how we actually have to think about our code. If you're coming from the Ethereum world, your EVM mindset probably says, hey, let's just build one giant monolithic smart contract that holds all the state and all the underlying assets, an all-in-one bucket. But on Solana, the SVM mindset demands something completely different. We have to use stateless programs that interact with entirely separate token accounts and mints. We are taking the exact same ERC functionality, but we're building it with completely different modular materials. It literally forces us to decouple our logic from our storage.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of a Vault, Core Solana Accounts.
So on Solana, absolutely everything is an account. Because of that, our vault foundation consists of four main pillars. First up, the vault state, which holds our numerical totals. Second, the token vault account. This is what physically holds the underlying assets. Third, we have the shares min, which issues our receipts. And fourth, the authority keys, which basically dictate who is allowed to do what. Since Solana programs are inherently stateless, this separation of powers isn't just a good idea, it's totally mandatory. We have to keep our state completely explicit and incredibly compact to make sure the program stays efficient.
Which actually brings us to a brilliant way to visualize the shares mint. Think of it literally like walking into a casino. You don't walk up to a blackjack table and place bets with your $100 bills, right? You trade your cash, which represents the underlying tokens, for casino chips. That shares mint is your stack of chips. It is the tokenized representation of your exact ownership stake in the vault's underlying assets. So you hold the chips, and the vault securely holds the cash.
Next up, Section 3, Deposits and Withdrawals, the logical flow. With our foundation port, how do we actually move assets in and out? Well, every deposit essentially follows this exact three-step dance. Step 1, we transfer the underlying tokens from the user right into the vault. Step 2, we compute the proportional shares based on what's already inside. And Step 3, we mint those newly calculated shares back to the user. These three steps are absolutely the beating heart of your vault's logic. And the beauty of it is, if any single one of these fails, the whole transaction just rolls back, keeping everything perfectly secure.
Let's actually visualize that proportional math for a second. If a vault is totally empty and you deposit 100 tokens, you get 100 shares. It's a super simple 1-to-1 ratio. But let's say the vault already holds 200 tokens and there are 100 shares out in the wild. If you come along and deposit another 100 tokens, which increases the vault's underlying value by exactly 50%, the program will crunch the numbers and mint you exactly 50 shares. You get a proportional slice of the pie based precisely on your exact contribution.
But fair warning here, when you're calculating those slices, you are going to meet the Rust compiler, and let me tell you, the Rust compiler acts like a hilariously strict construction foreman. It explicitly demands that we use extra-wide U128 integers as temporary intermediates for our math. Why? Well, because multiplying total shares by total assets can create a staggeringly massive number. If you use a smaller integer type, your math will overflow, the program will straight up panic, and the vault will essentially eat your tokens. Nobody wants that. So we keep the foreman happy, we use U128.
All right, Section 4, wiring up the architecture, secure communication.
We've got the walls up, but now we need to wire our security system to the rest of the Solana network. To do that, we use a CPI, or a cross-program invocation. Remember, our vault program is stateless. It doesn't inherently know how to move tokens around. So the CPI is the critical wiring that allows our vault to securely call out to Solana's native SPL token program. We're basically asking it to handle the heavy lifting of transferring assets or minting those casino chips we talked about. Instead of reinventing the wheel, we just use a CPI to securely delegate all that standardized token logic.
But here's a question. If our program is asking the token program to move funds, who exactly is signing the permission slip? That is where the PDA, or program-derived address, comes in. I want you to think of the PDA as your automated robotic vault manager. It's a cryptographic address controlled entirely by your program's code based on specific seeds. It holds the keys and signs the CPIs, all without needing a human being's private key. This is what ensures the vault operates completely autonomously and trustlessly.
Bringing those two concepts together is where the real magic happens. The PDA signs the CPI, sending it to the SPL Token program to move those assets safely. And I highly recommend you literally burn this specific intersection into your memory, because if you find yourself pulling your hair out debugging later on, I guarantee it will be right here. Most program failures happen at this exact point, usually because the PDA authority you provided just doesn't perfectly match the expected automated signer. So getting your PDA seeds right, absolutely essential.
Section 5. The Building Inspector. Testing and Validation.
Look, before anyone puts real money into this thing, we have to pass a fiercely meticulous inspection. To pass this capstone milestone, your repository has to meet these exact acceptance criteria. Your program must compile cleanly. Your Rust unit tests for the core math absolutely must pass. Your end-to-end integration flows have to succeed on a local validator. Your shares accounting must be flawlessly proportional. And finally, your README has to perfectly document your interfaces and any known limitations. Both the automated and manual checks must be completely green before we can call this done. Now, for that local validator integration, the inspector demands a very specific end-to-end sequence. Step 1, initialize the vault. Step 2, mint test tokens to a mock user. Step 3, perform a deposit and explicitly assert that the balance is changed correctly. And Step 4, withdraw the shares and assert the underlying tokens actually came back. You can't just run the code and assume the transfer worked. Asserting the delta proves that your CPIs and your PDAs are actually functioning securely in a live runtime environment.
And I seriously wasn't kidding about the inspector being incredibly strict. Listen to this specific requirement. Record actual integer arithmetic results and any rounding behavior. Why? Well, because we are dealing with integer division on a blockchain, and sometimes a tiny fraction of a token just gets rounded off. If balances are off by a single unit due to rounding, it's not necessarily a catastrophic failure, but it absolutely 100% must be documented and mathematically tested for so we completely avoid any precision loss vulnerabilities down the line.
Finally, Section 6, wrapping up the capstone. Comparative analysis. As you transition deeper into Solana development, I want you to take these 3 core architectural principles with you. Number 1, always use explicit account naming and keep your state as compact as possible. It just makes audits and testing so much easier. Number 2, lean heavily on PDAs as program authorities so you can safely execute those CPIs. And number 3, always use wider intermediate math types like U128 to protect your users from devastating overflow panics.
So, what is next? Well, we are going to take this exact foundation and learn all about gasless transaction flows on Solana. As you wrap up this Vault project, just make sure you clearly document your PDA seeds and signers in your README, because in our next explainer, we are actually going to use relayer integrations to pay transaction fees entirely on behalf of the user. Which actually leaves us with a pretty fascinating puzzle for next time. If your Vault's PDA controls the assets, how do we safely restructure those authorities when a third-party relayer steps in to pay the transaction fees? Keep that provocative thought simmering. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Remember to head over to forge.college to dive much deeper into the subject and to explore a wealth of other incredible Web3 topics. Happy building, and I will see you in the next explainer.